Nicotinamide mononucleotide, better known as NMN, continues to be one of the most popular anti-aging supplements on the market today. Get comfy because now we're going to take a deep dive into every human clinical trial on NMN I was able to locate. Oh, and by the way, I don't work for any supplement company and I don't work for Big Pharma either. Okay, so before we go any further, there have been some safety studies of NMN to make sure it's safe. So let's begin our discussion with looking at those. So we have this paper, which is probably the first safety study ever done. It was involved 10 healthy men. They're in their late 40s and they're given between 100, 250, and 500 milligrams of NMN each day or a placebo. 5 hours later, they give these guys some tests and they noticed that the NMN did in fact raise metabolites of NMN, and that's good. However, there were no changes in heart rate or blood pressure. That's good as well. Didn't make heart rate go up, didn't make blood pressure go up, so that's a good thing. Now, one oddity of this paper that I wanted to call your attention to is that this paper also reported that bilirubin increased by about 51% in those who took NMN supplements, although the increase in bilirubin was still within the normal range. Now, I bring that up in case you have your blood test done and this happens to you, although I do think this is going to probably be a fluke because having looked at all the other studies that we're about to talk about, I don't see a rise in bilirubin in any of those studies that actually measured that compound. Next up, we have this safety investigation, which was a bit larger. We have 31 healthy men and women. They're in their mid-30s, and they're given a whopping 1,250 milligrams of Beta NMN, or a placebo, each day for 4 weeks. Oh, and by the way, if you're wondering, Beta NMN is often said to be the active form of this compound. So the good news here is that after 4 weeks of use, Beta NMN did not cause any negative side effects. There were also no changes in cholesterol levels or bad cholesterol, LDL levels, or triglycerides either. And while that is good that the values did not increase, it is also true from this paper that 1,250 milligrams of Beta NMN did not lower these values either. Next up is this next safety investigation, which has a very wordy title, as you can see, where 66 healthy men and women, they're in their late 40s, and they're given 300 milligrams of nicotinamide mononucleotide or a placebo, and they take the supplement or the placebo every day after breakfast, and the study lasts 2 months. Oh, and by the way, in this study, they're actually testing a specific brand of NMN called Youth Ever, which is a pretty catchy name if you ask me. Now, the good news here is that there were no side effects reported from the Youth Ever supplement. That's really good. And if we drill down further, we also see that this supplement increased the NAD to NADH ratio by about 40%. That's good too. However, on the flip side, the NMN supplement did not increase walking distance when people did what was called the 6-minute walk test. Now, these people were also given a well-being test called the S36 test. And while some of them appeared to show that their overall well-being appeared to improve when they were taking the NMN supplement, the differences between the supplement takers and the placebo takers, again, was not clinically meaningful. As for blood pressure, the supplement did not lower blood pressure any better than a placebo. There were no significant differences there. And additionally, there were no significant improvements in insulin sensitivity. In other words, how well insulin can lower blood sugar levels. However, these people were generally healthy, and so I wouldn't expect it to have a significant effect in people who don't have diabetes, for example. Speaking of diabetes, we have this clinical trial which investigated the effects of NMN supplements in people who had elevated blood sugar levels. For 10 weeks, 35 overweight women who were in their 60s, who also had elevated blood sugar levels, were given 250 milligrams of NMN or a placebo each day. And as they do state in the title of this investigation, the insulin sensitivity of muscles was increased by about 25%, and that is good. However, there were no significant improvements in blood sugar levels. Furthermore, there were also no reductions in blood pressure or body fat or body weight either. Here's a sample of some of the before and after results that occurred in this investigation. Feel free to stop the video at this point, zoom in, and take a closer look at what happened. They also gave these people before and after grip strength tests to gauge how well NMN might have made these people stronger. However, it didn't. Ironically, too, there were no improvements in muscle mitochondrial function either. I bring that up because one of the things that NMN is supposed to do is help the mitochondria work better. In this paper, it didn't. Next up is this study, which lasted 3 months. It involved 11 healthy men and women. They took 250 milligrams of NMN or a placebo each day in the morning. And as the title does indeed tell us, NMN supplements did raise plasma NMN levels. That's good. However, those levels began to decline after about a month of not taking the supplement any longer. And that's to be expected. Once you stop taking these things, your NAD levels would be expected to go back down again. As we can see from this before and after table, NMN also significantly raised insulin levels after just 2 months. Now, insulin is responsible for lowering blood sugar. However, in this paper, it is also reported that NMN failed to lower blood sugar or hemoglobin A1C. Likewise, NMN supplements did not lower cholesterol levels or bad LDL cholesterols either. However, the weirdest thing, in my opinion, that was reported in this study is what happened to triglyceride levels. After just 1 month, triglyceride levels doubled from about 80 to 186 milligrams per deciliter. By the end of the study, the triglycerides had declined a bit down to 155 milligrams per deciliter, but that's still higher than what is normally recommended for healthy people. Now, to be fair, this is the only clinical trial I located showing that triglyceride levels skyrocket after taking NMN supplements, so it might be a fluke. However, if you ask me, this finding should have been in the title of this investigation. Next up is this interesting investigation of what they call long-term NMN supplementation, where we have 34 men and women. They're in their late 40s. They are given 250 milligrams or a placebo each day for 3 months. And they're basically looking at whether NMN can improve the health and functioning of the blood vessels. So this is essentially a cardiovascular disease study, although they did also measure some other things as well. For example, these researchers report that NMN significantly raises nicotinamide levels in the serum. And that makes sense because NMN contains nicotinamide, which is also known as niacinamide. That's the no-flush version of niacin. Now, moving on to arterial stiffness, which I think is the main focus of the study, there were no significant differences in arterial stiffness between placebo takers and supplement takers. And something else they point out is that this lack of improvement also seemed to carry over to whether or not the people had high blood pressure or not. So again, you would think that it might not work as well in people with normal blood pressure, but there didn't appear also to be any significant improvement in arterial stiffness in people who had high blood pressure either. Additionally, these researchers also tell us that NMN supplements also did not have any improvement on lowering blood sugar levels or lowering bad LDL cholesterol levels. It didn't raise HDL levels or triglycerides, and it didn't raise testosterone or other hormones either. However, on the plus side, it's also reported that there were no increases in liver enzymes either, so that is good. Next up is this paper, which tells us from the title that NMN is not only safely broken down in the body, but it also significantly lowers triglycerides too. Now, that statement is bound to get everybody's attention, especially those who have elevated triglycerides. However, there is a word that they did not include in the title of this study. This clinical trial involved 10 healthy middle-aged men and women. They were in their 40s, and they were given 300 milligrams of NMN that was dissolved in 3.5 ounces of water. That solution was then injected into these people. In other words, they gave these people infusions of nicotinamide mononucleotide, which is very different than taking an NMN dietary supplement. Another limitation of the study, in my opinion, is that they gave these people before and after blood tests, 5 hours before and up to 5 hours after they gave them the infusion. In other words, this study only lasted 10 hours. And as I pointed out in my original review of this investigation, the triglyceride levels began to drop quickly after the NMN infusion. They went from around 80 milligrams per deciliter all the way down to 20 milligrams per deciliter in about an hour after getting the infusion. However, and this is an important point, those triglyceride levels began to rise again after about 3 or 4 hours. Now, I've heard that people are getting infusions of NMN, and this paper might be one of the reasons why that's happening. However, I do want to point out a few problems with this study. Number one, the people were healthy. In other words, they didn't have elevated triglyceride levels to begin with. So that's one problem. The other problem with this study is that there was only 10 people, so it was a small investigation. There was no placebo group. Something else is that the NMN infusions were given to people after an overnight fast. So what would happen if you had breakfast and then you went and got your infusion? Would the same thing happen with triglycerides or anything else? We're not sure yet. And also because the study lasted just 10 hours, this can't prove that infusions of NMN will indeed lower triglyceride levels long term. Now let's switch gears and talk about whether NMN can improve your exercise performance. And we have this paper, nicotinamide mononucleotide supplementation enhances aerobic capacity in amateur runners, a randomized double-blind study. Here we have 48 middle-aged men and women. They are runners. They're actually part of a running group in China, and they are given 3 different dosages of NMN, 300 milligrams, 600 milligrams, and 1200 milligrams or placebo each day, and the study lasts for 6 weeks. Everybody works out 5 to 6 days a week for between 40 and 60 minutes per exercise session. And I also want to point out that the placebo in this study that was used was a combination of cranberry powder and maltodextrin. So kudos to the researchers for telling us what the placebo is. We'll stick a pin in that for right now. I want to circle back and talk about that in a moment. So the first thing that I would say is that NMN failed to promote any superior losses in body fat or body weight. However, the supplement was reported to improve what's called the ventilatory threshold, and higher doses of NMN appeared to increase ventilatory threshold better than lower doses. And if you're unfamiliar with that term, ventilatory threshold is the point of exercise when you start breathing harder and exercise begins to start to feel difficult for you. It's also associated with the buildup of lactic acid in the body during exercise. In other words, NMN supplements appeared to help these runners work harder, exercise harder, before they started to feel the exercise getting difficult. And that is actually really interesting. However, I will point out that even though ventilatory threshold is associated with the buildup of lactic acid, unfortunately, they did not measure lactic acid in this study. I also want to point out that NMN did not improve VO2 max or oxygen saturation in these runners either. VO2 max is essentially the maximum volume or amount of oxygen that you can consume into the body and turn that oxygen into energy. And oxygen saturation is essentially how much oxygen is saturating your blood. And while no improvement was seen in this study, I really can't fault them on this because we are looking at highly conditioned runners who already likely have a very high VO2 max to start off with, and because they're also healthy, their oxygen saturation is also extremely high as well. Now, they also performed some fitness testing on these runners as well, and it's reported that NMN supplements did not improve muscle strength or muscle endurance, and it didn't improve flexibility of the muscles either. Now, one odd result here is that NMN did appear to improve balance. However, that was only seen in those who were taking the 600 milligram dose. Now, I want to circle back for a moment and talk about that placebo that was used in this study. If this study is ever replicated, my hope is that the cranberry powder is taken out of the placebo, and that is because there is some research suggesting that cranberries may have an exercise benefit. Now, let's switch gears and talk about the effects of NMN in older adults, and let's begin with this paper involving chronic long-term supplementation, which they define as 3 months. Here we're dealing with 40 older men. They're in their 70s, and they're given either a placebo or 250 milligrams of NMN each day. Here's the various tests they did on these people at the beginning of the study. To me, it looks like their hemoglobin A1C values look a little bit on the high side. So some of these individuals may be moving into pre-diabetes. Now, the other thing I do want to point out with this paper is that it does suffer from what I think is a big problem, and that is they began their study originally with 42 people, but only 20 people completed the investigation. And the reason is that after the study, it was recognized that the supplier of the placebo and the supplements made an error, which resulted in 11 of the supplement takers getting placebo and 11 of the placebo people getting the actual NMN supplements. So those 22 people had to be removed from this study. Okay, so all that said, what happened? So no surprise, NMN raises NAD levels and levels of NMN itself also, as well as its metabolites, so that's good. One interesting finding here, however, is the observation that NMN also increased levels of nicotinamide riboside. Nicotinamide riboside is the other big player in this NAD booster arena, and I will link to my videos on nicotinamide riboside below so you can see more about the research on that. We see from the results that NMN supplements did not reduce fat from either the liver or the spleen, and likewise, there were no improvements in insulin sensitivity either. Additionally, as pointed out in other studies, NMN failed to produce any improvements in cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, triglycerides, blood sugar, hemoglobin A1C, or fasting glucose levels either. Likewise, there was no improvement in blood pressure or blood vessel health, and before and after cognitive tests showed no improvement in learning or memory either. Now, they did point out that hearing seemed to improve in the right ear only. However, it wasn't a clinically significant effect, so it might have just been a fluke. Now, as for the effects of NMN on muscle, well, there were no improvements in muscle mass in these people. However, there was a somewhat improvement in grip strength in the left hand only in the people who were taking the supplements. However, it wasn't clinically significant. It was said to be a nominal improvement. Now, on the flip side here, these researchers did see a significant improvement in gait speed, where the people taking this supplement did appear to be able to walk a little faster. Next up, we have this interesting investigation involving telomere length. It's a small study involving only 6 men and 2 women. They're between the ages of 40 and 60, and they take 300 milligrams of NMN in the morning, 30 minutes after breakfast with warm water. They do this each day for 3 months. Now, for me, the most interesting part of this study was where they report that 3 months of NMN supplements, again at 300 milligrams a day, caused a significant increase in the length of the telomeres in white blood cells. Telomeres are found at the ends of the chromosomes, and as we get older, the telomeres begin to shorten, and so some associate shorter telomeres with increased aging. Next up is this study, which has a really long title, where 80 middle-aged men in their late 40s are given either 300, 600, or 900 milligrams of Beta NMN daily versus a placebo, and the study lasts for 2 months. Oh, and by the way, it's pointed out that they're testing a specific brand called mononucleotide NMN. Now, one of the interesting and odd parts of this study is where they state that NAD levels in the blood went higher when people took 600 milligrams more than when they took 300 milligrams. However, you didn't see this when people took 900 milligrams of NMN. In other words, 600 milligrams raised NAD better than 300 milligrams did, but 900 didn't work any better than 600. Everybody who was taking this supplement said that their quality of life had improved by the end of the study, and those who were taking the 600 and 900 milligram dose actually started feeling better within just 30 days. Moving on to the blood test, here are some of the before and after values that were reported in this study, and as you can see, there were no significant changes in cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, triglycerides, or insulin resistance. Notice here also that bilirubin did not go up either, which contradicts the outcome of that other study I told you about previously, which stated that bilirubin increased 51%. This study contradicts that, and so again reinforces my thought that that original finding was a fluke. Leaving that paper and moving on to the next one, we have this clinical trial, and again involving beta nicotinamide mononucleotide, where 60 older people took 250 milligrams of beta NMN or a placebo. Again, the study lasts for 3 months. Results of this study reveal that there was no improvement in the step test. In other words, how many times people could step up and down in a period of time. However, these people taking the supplement could walk a bit further than those who took placebos. Also reported was that those who took the supplements stated that they slept better and that they appeared to function better during the daytime hours. And I thought this was interesting because several people have told me privately that their NMN seemed to help them sleep better. So this may be some evidence for that. Although I do want to point out that I wasn't able to read this full study when I posted this video. I'm in the process of getting it now. So when I do get this investigation, I will do a follow-up, more in-depth video on this investigation. Next up is what I believe is the very first clinical trial on MIB-626. MIB-626 is a proprietary version of beta nicotinamide mononucleotide, which was developed by International Biotech. Here we have 31 overweight people, and they're between the ages of 55 and 80. They're given 1,000 milligrams of MIB-626 either once a day or twice a day for 2 weeks. So in other words, these people are taking between 1,000 and 2,000 milligrams of MIB-626 daily. Results show that the 1,000 milligram dose of MIB-626 raised blood levels of NAD about 1.7 times above baseline, while those taking the higher dose of 2,000 milligrams each day saw a bump of about 3.7 times higher NAD relative to what it was at baseline. And while that is nice, do you notice what they didn't do in the study? They didn't compare MIB-626 to regular NMN. Now we also have another investigation of MIB-626. Here it is. 30 overweight people are given either a placebo or 1,000 milligrams of MIB-626 NMN each day for 28 days. Here they are reporting that not only did NAD levels rise, but also there were significant reductions in not only body weight, but also cholesterol, LDL, and non-HDL cholesterol as well. And let's reiterate, these benefits showed up after just 28 days. However, when they tested these older adults, they found that MIB-626 failed to improve muscle strength or muscle endurance. It didn't help aerobic capacity or stair climbing, and it didn't reduce insulin resistance or liver fat or abdominal fat either. The next paper I want to show you is this investigation of NMN in older men with diabetes. 14 men who are in their 80s are given 250 milligrams of NMN or a placebo for 6 months. To my knowledge, this is the longest NMN supplement study that I was able to find. And while this is indeed a small investigation, I like it because we're dealing with older, frail people, which is a great population to test an anti-aging supplement on. Results from the study showed that NMN failed to improve grip strength, which is again a common indicator of muscle strength, and it also didn't help these older people walk faster either. Likewise, there was no improvement in diabetes in these people either. By the way, I was also unable to get a hold of this study by the time I made this video. When I do get it, I'll make it a more in-depth video on this paper too. And if you're still with me, fantastic. Now we come to the very last clinical trial that I have for you today, and it involves 108 older men and women. They're in their 70s. They take 250 milligrams of NMN each day or a placebo, and this study lasts for 3 months. And to see if it is better to take NMN in the morning or in the evening, they actually broke people up into AM and PM groups. And just to be more clear here, they defined the AM group as taking NMN anytime from when they awoke up to 12 p.m. And the PM group was defined as anywhere from 6 p.m. on to bedtime. Now, the results of this study reveal that the quality of sleep didn't appear to be impacted by NMN. However, the longer they took the supplement, the better their sleep was and daytime functioning scores were. In other words, the longer they took the supplement appeared to play a role in their sleep and their daytime functioning. Something else that's reported that that is worth mentioning is that there may have been a difference in the time effects here, where people taking the supplement in the afternoon appeared to have less drowsiness compared to people who took this supplement in the morning. However, it's also reported that there was a placebo effect that was observed here as well. So what this means is we're still not sure whether it's better to take NMN in the morning, afternoon, or in the evening. Okay, if you're still with me, phenomenal. We're almost done. I know I presented an awful lot of information here, so let's see if we can make some sense out of the results of all of these studies. Now, the first thing I would say is that pretty much all the studies don't report any negative side effects, so that is a good thing. And also, pretty much all of them state that when you take the supplement, NAD levels and metabolites of NAD also increase as well. That's good. However, I would also point out that the study researchers usually only measure NAD levels in a couple places, like, plasma, blood, skeletal muscle cells, etc. In other words, what I'm getting at here is we still don't know if taking these supplements increases NAD levels throughout the body, although that is the assumption here. Now, I couldn't show you all the studies on the screen at one time because there's just too many of them. So let's break this down and begin by looking at the studies of what I call diabetes and heart health. So if we look at these 4 clinical trials that I'm showing you right now, we can see some things in common here, such as at dosages of between 250 and 300 milligrams per day, NMN does not appear to have any effects on lowering triglycerides, lowering cholesterol or bad cholesterol levels. It doesn't appear to lower blood pressure. It doesn't appear to lower blood sugar or hemoglobin A1C either. We also see the same lack of effect in other studies too. And so far, only one clinical trial revealed a significant decline in triglyceride levels. But again, that was for intravenously used NMN, which is not really relevant to people who take NMN as a dietary supplement. Now, if we move over to the exercise effects of NMN, I found only one clinical trial involving high-functioning, healthy people who were exercising and taking NMN supplements. The study that you're looking at here does appear to show that at dosages of between 600 and 1200 milligrams a day, NMN may improve ventilatory threshold after several weeks of use. This, as well as other studies, also reveal that NMN does not seem to improve muscle strength or muscle endurance or the flexibility of muscles either. Now, if we transition to those studies of older folks who take this supplement, well, these also add evidence that at dosages between 250 and 1,000 milligrams taken for several weeks, NMN does not appear to have any significant effects on lowering blood sugar, triglycerides, LDL, or improving insulin levels either. Likewise, NMN does not appear to improve muscle mass in older folks either. And from what we know so far, this supplement may or may not improve walking speed, walking distance, or grip strength. As for the 2 studies of the MIB-626 form of NMN, these studies are ongoing, but from the 2 clinical trials I was able to find, the longest of these studies lasted just 28 days, which is not very long. Neither study revealed any side effects, and both revealed that at dosages between 1,000 and 2,000 milligrams per day, NAD levels do indeed go up. However, these short-term studies also reveal that MIB-626 doesn't appear to have any beneficial effects on blood pressure, cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, liver fat, or insulin resistance. Moving forward, researchers should also compare MIB-626 effects to regular NMN, as well as the already well-known health benefits of regular exercise. So if I were to boil this down into one statement, this would be it. Based on the results of the 16 different clinical trials I just presented, I remain skeptical of the claims for NMN as a geroprotective supplement, but what do you think?